There are two things that a leader can influence when it comes to getting results. There's the strategy or the plan, and then there's the ability to execute that strategy. And if you ask leaders, which of these two things do they struggle with more? The vast majority of leaders are going to tell you it's execution. Now, if you've been to business school or you have an MBA, ask yourself this question. What was it you were studying? Were you studying execution, or were you studying strategy and business planning? We find it very interesting that what leaders are struggling with is not what they were educated in. Ram Charan said that 70% of strategic failures are due to poor execution of leadership. It's rarely for lack of smarts or vision. There is one overwhelming reason why execution is as difficult as it is. Within every organization, there's a clash or a rub between two forces. The one is what we call the whirlwind or the day job. This is all the energy and attention that's needed to keep the organization running today. This is what keeps your doors open. It maintains the operation. It's what people will often refer to as the real work. The other force is the goals for moving the organization forward. These two things are not the same. They're both absolutely necessary, and they do not get along. Ask yourself this question. Would the people in my organization still be busy even if we didn't have any goals for moving the organization forward? Think about the strategies, the initiatives, the priorities that you've seen die. What killed them? Was it incompetence? Was it defiance? The vast majority of the cases that we see, they are choked or starved by the whirlwind, by the urgency of the day-to-day. People are not stupid and they're not lazy. They're busy. The primary characteristic of the whirlwind is urgency. It acts on you. The goals for moving the organization forward are important, but they never have the same immediacy or urgency as the whirlwind does. You have to act on them. When urgency and importance clash, urgency wins. Here's the bottom line. The challenge with execution is not simply executing on a goal. It's executing on a goal in the midst of a 100-mile-an-hour whirlwind. The four disciplines of execution exist solely for the purpose of helping an organization execute on its most important goals in the midst of that whirlwind. Even though these disciplines are logical and straightforward, they are not easy to implement or maintain in an organizational setting. They say easy, they do hard. And whether you're running a very simple organization or a very complex one, the good news is they always work. The first of these disciplines is to focus on the wildly important. If a team or an organization has 2 to 3 goals, in addition to the whirlwind, they're likely to achieve 2 to 3 goals. That same team has 4 to 10 goals, they're likely to achieve only 1 or 2. This is called the law of diminishing returns, and it is real. That same team has 11 to 20 goals, they're not likely to accomplish anything outside of the whirlwind. At 11 to 20 goals, they can't even hear you, let alone execute. Now, while this is a simple enough idea, it's very difficult for most organizations to adhere to. Leaders are typically the ambitious and the creative type. Now, the problem with that type is they always want to do more and not less. And there will always be more good ideas than there is capacity to execute. Because of that, organizations have to say no to good ideas, and that's very counterintuitive. They like to say no to the bad ideas, not the good ideas. Said differently, in the words of Jim Collins, the enemy of the great is the good. These critical few goals that are in addition to the whirlwind are called the wildly important goals, or WIGs. These are the goals that make all the difference. Failure to achieve these goals renders any other achievement inconsequential. Here are a few of the critical rules that apply to Discipline 1. First, no team can have more than 1 to 2 WIGs at the same time. Second, the sub-WIG can be different than the parent WIG, but must ensure the success of the parent WIG. It's not enough for the sub-WIGs to align or support. The sub-WIG, or the battle, must ensure the success of the parent WIG, or the war. And finally, third, each WIG must have a clear finish line, a single statement of success, from X to Y by when. Too often, goals are defined in vague general terms with a variety of measures that only dilute clarity and accountability. In the 1950s, our struggling space program had the goal of leading the world in space exploration, and that was a fine goal, and there were lots of measures associated with it, but there was very little focus, clarity, or accountability. In '61, Kennedy said something very different. He said, "We will put a man on the moon by the end of the decade and return him safely home." When he stated that from X to Y by when, he drew a line in the sand. Accountability went up, and interestingly enough, so did morale and engagement. Within every organization that we work, whenever we move from a half a dozen or a dozen of these "we kinda ought to" goals to one or two no matter what's, there is a tangible change in morale and engagement. There's a little switch in people's heads called game on. In Discipline 1, we want to throw that switch. The second discipline is to act on the lead measure. Once a clear finish line is established in Discipline 1, the team knows how it wins or loses. It has its lag measure. The key to execution, though, is to act on the lead measure. Now, while lag measures measure the goal, lead measures measure something that leads to the goal and something the team can influence. A lead measure is predictive of goal success, but is also influenceable by the team. This is the golden rule of execution, focusing on a predictive and influenceable measure. In a word, it is leverage. For instance, if you want to lose weight, the lag measure is weight loss. The lead measure, and there's two of them, you got it, right? Diet, calories taken in, and exercise, calories burned. They're predictive of weight loss, and they're also more directly influenceable. Here's the problem. Human beings fixate on lag measures rather than lead measures, even though the lag measure isn't directly influenceable. And they do this for two reasons. First, because the lag measure matters. That's the thing you want, or that's the thing you're accountable for. The second reason people fixate on lag measures is because lag data is always easier to get. All right, let's go back to the weight loss thing. If you've got scales in your bathroom, right, you can step on those scales and in 2 seconds you know what the data is telling you. But you probably have no idea how many calories you've eaten today, and figuring out how many calories you've burned is even more difficult. Not only are lag measures easier to measure, half the time they'll chase you down. One of our clients affectionately refers to lag measures as "oh crap" measures, because when you look at them, you're either saying "oh cool" or "oh crap," but it doesn't feel like you have a lot of influence over them. As a matter of fact, if you feel like luck is playing a role in your career, it's because you're looking at lag measures. Lead measures are different for every team and every wig. For example, out of stocks in a grocery store driving store sales, compliance to safety standards driving a reduction in accidents, qualified prospects driving a monthly sales number, improved preventative maintenance and full crews driving improved plant production, number of one-on-one coaching sessions with call center reps to drive a customer satisfaction number. Your lead measures aren't always that easy to identify, and they're not always that easy to track either. This is the main reason why narrowing the focus in Discipline 1 is so critical. If a given team is trying to impact half a dozen goals simultaneously, it becomes almost impossible to identify and track that many lead measures, particularly in the face of the whirlwind. The third discipline is to create a compelling scoreboard. The purpose of that scoreboard is to hold the lead and lag measures from Discipline 1 and Discipline 2. And without a scoreboard, it won't take people very long to forget what the lead measure and the lag measure actually were. Now, creating a scoreboard isn't very tricky. Creating a compelling scoreboard, that's the difficult part. It needs to feel at least a little like a game. And to do that well, there are 4 rules. First, they've got to be simple. Think about how many football statistics there are and how many are actually on the scoreboard itself. This is about creating a player's scoreboard, not a coach's scoreboard. Second, it has to be visible to the players. Third, it has to show both the lead and the lag measure. I have to see that I can affect the score, that's the lead part, and that it's making a real difference, that's the lag part. And finally, most importantly, you can tell immediately if you are winning or if you are losing. One of our clients, a manufacturing company operating in North Carolina, made a very interesting observation. They realized after doing this that every employee in the plant could tell you on any day whether they were winning or whether they were losing on their top priorities. This is fascinating to us because most executives can't provide you with that information. By the way, that same plant is also producing twice the profits with less people than all of its sister plants. We also believe that the single biggest contributor to employee morale is whether or not a person feels they're winning at work. Just go back in your own life and think about the time when you were most engaged or most excited about what you were doing professionally, and see if at that time you didn't feel like you were winning. Disciplines 1, 2, and 3 create a winnable game for a person. Not just a game, but a winnable game. Preview. Discipline 4, create a cadence of accountability, is where the real execution takes place. This discipline revolves around a 20-minute meeting that happens every week for every team that owns a wildly important goal. It happens at the same time each week, and in this meeting, you do not discuss the whirlwind, even if the building's on fire. And every person on the team shows up thinking about the very same critical question. What are the 1 to 3 things that I can do this week in order to impact the scoreboard? In this 15 to 20 minute WIG session, each person takes just about 2 minutes to review 3 things. First, I report on last week's commitments. Did I do what I said I was going to do? Second, I review the scoreboard. Is the lead measure moving? And if so, is the lag measure responding? And finally, third, based on what the scoreboard is telling me, what am I going to do in the upcoming week to impact those lead measures? As you look at this week of time, you can see the yellow blocks are those objectives where we're trying to have an impact on the lead measure. And the blue, as you can guess, that's the whirlwind. Now, if you were to remove those yellow blocks, you can see, and you know from experience, it will not stay white. It'll turn blue, and it'll turn blue fast. The 4 disciplines is a process for driving the yellow into the blue. Folks, this is what execution looks like. One of our clients from a Fortune 500 company put it a very interesting way. She said, we don't have dragons swooping down, knocking us off our priorities. What we have are gnats every day with the gnats in our eyes. And we look back over 6 months and we haven't done any of the things we said we were going to do. The 4th discipline is gnat repellent. Let's take an example and walk it all the way through. Let's say that Bob is the manager over a number of crews in a construction company where the wildly important goal is safety. And in his slice of the meeting, he's going to do those 3 things. First, he's going to report on the commitments he made last week. Commitments he either completed or didn't complete. Second, he's going to look at the scoreboard, and this is the critical part. On the scoreboard, he'll see the lag measure or the wildly important goal, which in this case is the incident report. And here, it's not moving at all. It's being stubborn. He also looks at the lead measure, which the organization has said is compliance to 8 safety standards. Now, as he looks at the lead measure, he can tell that while most things are okay, crews 9, 11, and 13 are not wearing their protective eyewear when they use the saws. The third thing he does in the meeting is he makes commitments for the upcoming week. And of course, based on the scoreboard, he commits to talk to the foreman of crews 9, 11, and 13, make sure they've got the eyewear, let them know it's not optional to use them. Now, here's the bet that Bob is making. He's betting that those activities will have an impact on the lead measure. It's a pretty good bet. The company as a whole is betting that the lead measure of compliance with the 8 safety standards will drive the lag measure of incident rate. And that turned out to be a very good bet. From this example, you can see how critical it is that the lead measure be both influenceable and predictive. A lot of organizations use the 4 disciplines of execution as a sort of sane alternative to the way they typically implement their strategic plans. And you can see from this example that no matter how detailed a strategic plan might be, and we've seen some very detailed ones, that no strategic plan is going to tell Bob that on week 27 he needs to talk to crews 9, 11, and 13. The planning that happens with the 4 disciplines happens every week. It's just-in-time planning, and it's planning that's responsive to what the lead measure is telling you. The 4 disciplines of execution, in short, do 3 things for every team. First, it provides simple, direct clarity around strategic priority. It separates the wildly important goal from the whirlwind and creates very clear line of sight around how we're going to influence that wildly important goal. The second thing that it does is it engages every member of the team around a winnable game. And finally, and most important, it allows an organization to achieve its wildly important goal in the midst of a whirlwind.